Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Sharby Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
We appreciate all the support and recent content. All of our Olympic live streams are up for viewing. If you want to go back and view those, we covered the Olympic Games as they happen game by game. So if you want our thoughts on that, as they closed, please go and check those out. We do have a comment from Jack City 718 on YouTube on our video, breaking down the New York Knicks and their offseason. And he said a Knick fan has just entered the chat. Welcome. Thank you for, finding our channel and sticking around and commenting. But, I think it's awesome because I don't know any Knicks fans personally. So I'm glad you enjoyed, our breakdown of your team.
Yeah, and hopefully you also really appreciate it, considering we gave them a really good grade.
Yeah, we did.
As well for their off season. So, welcome to the channel. We appreciate, you joining us because, again, the channel's been growing pretty rapidly over the last couple of months. So, thanks for helping us out.
Yeah. Before we do get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yes, so USA basketball, it's done, it's Jover, it's concluded. We've come home with the gold, with a big win over France.
Yep.
Lot of ways to break down this game. Obviously we ended up winning 98-87. Led by the OGs, or as Anthony Edwards called them, the old heads, right?
Yeah.
So Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, also Devin Booker. Don't forget him, which we'll get to momentarily, right? They led us home to the gold, right? You had Steph leading the team in points with 24 points and 5 assists and 2 steals. All of his points came from the three-point line, including a flurry of threes in the fourth quarter when the game got kind of close, right? USA led the entire game, but there were points where, they would go up by maybe like 12, 13 points, and then France would make a run and cut it to, 6 to 8 points, something like that. And, every time they would kind of cut it close, we would keep them at bay, right? So Steph, adding on to his legacy with a gold medal, right? That's his first and possibly only gold medal, because it sounds like, he's not very sure whether or not he'll return for the 2028 Olympics, which happen to be in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just an example of, why he's so awesome and why he's so special, just in terms of being able to, kind of take the game over like that. And the last couple of games, right? He had 36 in the game against Serbia and 24 against France. And it was kind of funny because, I had mentioned, a handful of times, the fact that people had talked about, why is he playing so much? He's missing a lot of shots. He's not really doing much out there, right? But we talked about it, and it was just like, there's going to be a game where you're going to need his 3-point shooting. He's not going to stay cold the entire time. And he turned it up and got hot right when they needed it, which was important for them. Obviously, you also look around at the other guys. You had Kevin Durant with 15, had a big second half. LeBron James, right, kind of being a catalyst, for the entire Olympic run, right, which is why he ended up getting that FIBA MVP, right, award, which I didn't even know was a thing until they said that.
Yep.
Because they used it in 2004, and Ginobili won it for Argentina when they won gold, but then they just stopped using it for a long time, and then recently brought it back. I don't know what the reasoning for that was, but regardless, it doesn't matter. And so that was such a cool thing to see, like the older guys, when we needed it the most, right? And we've seen them all do it before, right? Because all those guys are, multi-time champions, right? They closed it out for us, and they ended up, bringing home the gold. And there were a lot of other guys that deserve credit too. And we'll get to them, in a little bit, right? Guys like AD and Devin Booker, Bam, not quite as much in this game, but in other games, everybody, that played a certain part to some degree, right? But just kind of go over what you thought as well, because it's honestly probably the most fun I've had watching, like Team USA basketball in a little while. Not that 2020 was bad, because obviously they won gold, and that was obviously cool in its own right, for other reasons as well, right? That was during COVID and things like that. But I just can't remember the last time that I had a lot as much fun watching the presentation. Maybe that also might have something to do with how it was done this year as well, right? In terms of like the broadcast and things like
Hmm.
that. But uh, nothing really but positives, to really look at for Team USA.
Yeah, I had no negatives, about this entire Olympic run really, but in terms of the enjoyment factor, yeah, I agree 100%. I think, you kind of look at the team number one and you're like, okay, this is like a dream scenario, where we finally get to see LeBron James and Steph Curry team up outside of an all-star game. So, that was like kind of the main driving factor for my enjoyment, and also obviously the roster being, as talented as it is from top to bottom. You can't ignore that. I also want to give a little bit of a shout out to KD because I believe now he's the most decorated male basketball Olympian of all time. So, he has 4 Olympic gold medals, which is awesome. So he's past Melo. I think he was tied with Melo before, but now he has passed him as well. So shout out to him because I think he had some great moments too in terms of closing the game out and things of that nature alongside LeBron and Steph, obviously. But, in our live stream, we covered, this game from top to bottom, really, talking about everybody's performance and, even like talking about it from the French perspective and what you saw from Wembanyama. But in terms of Team USA and their takeaways, yeah, I think, we've already talked about it in the short. We're going to stand on it. We think that this is the greatest basketball team ever assembled in terms of Olympic history. I'm taking it over the Dream Team just from the talent perspective and who they're playing against now. But yeah, there's so many unsung heroes and everybody really played a part, throughout this entire run. Everybody got their time to shine, I feel like, in one way or another. But in this game, I had no problems with Steve Kerr, really. I had no problems with any of the stars or anything like that. Everybody came and they showed out. They showed up and they put France to sleep.
I mean, if there's anything you could nitpick at, I guess maybe the turnovers, but it didn't really matter at the end of the day. The defense, right, which wasn't really present as much in the Serbia game, was a lot better in this game, right?
Yes.
They ended up holding them to 87. France, when you look at their box score, right, they shot, 48% from the field, which isn't bad, right, at all. But then you look at the 3-point shooting, 9 of 30 from three, missed a lot of free throws as well, 10 of 17 from the line. They also had 13 turnovers as well. And you just didn't get enough offensive production from, guys not named Wembanyama or Gorshan Yabusele, right, who had the poster dunk over LeBron, who's also kind of, getting a lot of noise now, right, because he had a great a national team run for France. But, obviously, for Wemby, right, this is only the beginning for him, right? Only 20 years old. He's coming off a great rookie season, right? So obviously there's going to be big things, coming for him, obviously, right? They
Mhm.
mentioned after the game, right, how he was not very happy, was very emotional losing because nobody likes to lose. And obviously you're up against a monster, right? Because obviously Team USA, we've already talked about it. We think it's the most talented team ever assembled. And so you're already an underdog, but to see him respond that way, that makes you feel really good about him going forward, right? In terms of from a competitive standpoint, we know he works hard. We know, the things he likes, to do from a work ethic standpoint. But obviously, right now, all the focus mainly is for Team USA because they're the winners, right? Obviously, you had other teams you want to shout out as well, right? Teams like Germany, teams like Serbia, right? Canada, not so much this time around because I thought they had a very awful showing in team
Mhm.
for the Olympics, especially considering the level of talent they had. But regardless, that's the cool thing, as you mentioned, right? The fact that you got to see guys like Steph and LeBron and Durant, playing together in games that actually matter, right? Because, like you said, normally it's the All Star game where we really only get to see them together, right? And not that the All Star game doesn't matter at all, right? But that's more of an exhibition game. Whereas this one, there's actually real stakes because you're playing for something. You're playing for a gold medal, right? Which
Yeah.
everybody, if they have an opportunity to get, would want. Especially in the cases for those guys because those are older guys. It is kind of interesting how reliant they were really on those older guys, but it's also a testament to their leadership as well, right? And that's going to be the cool thing for a lot of the younger guys is all the other guys that were on the team with them, right, are going to be able to pick their brains, and kind of learn things from them and kind of go back to their teams and come back better, right? Like a guy like an Edwards, right? This is a great experience for him, right? A guy like a Tyrese Halliburton, a Jason Tatum, Bam Adebayo, and Devin Booker and all those guys, right? Like these are great learning experiences for them because they can, like I said, they can kind of go back to their previous teams and do what they need to do, right? And in terms of unsung heroes, right, Devin Booker would be one of them, right, because of the fact that when he first was in the starting five or announced as a starter, right, a lot of people, including us, were a little bit surprised, right? We thought it might be Anthony Edwards, given what happened in the playoffs last year, but you could kind of see over the course of the run why he was a starter and why he was really important to the team because he was able to do a lot of things on both ends of the floor as a connector piece that was able to make this work, right? Because, for Phoenix, right, he's usually got the ball in his hands a lot more, right? Especially, last season he was running point guard basically. So he's acting as a big time scorer and facilitator, but in this one, he's kind of playing a role, right? As a movement shooter, but also as a defender, right? Because, he's taken on a lot of tougher defensive assignments for this group. And even though, it's not usually like the normal box score type defensive stats where you're seeing like stocks, steals and blocks and things like that. But it's still very, important to the team. You can see it in the plus minus, and if you watch the games, you can see, his impact as to why he was such an important piece for them, right? Even guys like Drew Holiday, obviously, right, two-time NBA champion as well, same thing. And then Anthony Davis, which we've already talked about, Bam Adebayo, right, same thing, right, where those guys every time they come in, right, good luck trying to score on them. And then for a guy like an AD, right, his role is a lot more simplified here because he's basically, a defensive, presence, and you're not really asking him to score, right? He's more of a cleanup guy, right? Dump offs, putbacks, lobs, things like that. So it's a testament to how versatile a ton of these guys are, in terms of the fact that from game to game, from, lineup to lineup, situation to situation, they can all kind of play different roles.
Yeah, 100%. I think like Drew Holiday and Devin Booker were very interchangeable at points, and it's kind of interesting. Like, KD started in this game, so you could definitely tell that they were just trying to close it out by any means possible. But, Drew Holiday was starting the majority of this run. And he was amazing, obviously with his team defense and individual defense and even his spot up ability. And same thing with Booker, which is awesome. And Booker played a lot of, three. So what I'm curious is, does that translate into, the regular season and playoffs for the Phoenix Suns, considering what they have going on with Tyus Jones? Who knows? But, for Book to kind of transition a little, I'm going to say transition a little bit backwards in a good way to kind of how he was, when Chris Paul was there, where you see a little bit more spot up from him and a little bit more focus on defense, which is really cool because I think, he's more than capable. And like you said, not necessarily a guy that gets the steals and the blocks, but he gets stops, which is kind of what you need and needed on this team, considering you have a bunch of stat stuffing guys. But I think with what Book was able to do offensively and defensively, it's amazing. And even getting out in transition and kind of replicating what Anthony Edwards would be doing in the starting lineup, where, he's going to score on the break a lot. But Book did that, too. It's just, he wasn't really doing a bunch of windmills or anything like that. It was more so layups. But yeah, overall, I really love the fit. I think the system that they ran and figured out, I think throughout the entire run was amazing, in terms of what Steve Kerr and the offense was doing. But like you said, the defense really is what carried the load. And throughout the run, we kind of saw the second unit come in and play patchwork. But, recently in the past two games, that was not the case, really. It was the stars and the starters, and, they were just cooking, and just on both ends of the floor. Everybody was doing something, even Steph. I think his defense wasn't horrible. I think he was decent, going back to that ball hockey kind of play style that he has where, he's going to get a lot of steals and be a little bit more physical than you think. I think Steph Curry is deceivingly strong where, you look at him, you think he might be a twig, but absolutely not. I think he can use his body and he knows what he's doing. And obviously LeBron, I think, his ability to play the point guard here is really what I think puts the team over the edge because that turns Steph Curry into a spot up. That turns D-Book into a spot up. KD as well. And, the challenge that a lot of these teams had was, okay, well, who do we leave open? Because somebody's got to be doubled. You have to apply that pressure or else, it's free game for LeBron, free game for Embiid. Somebody's going to be a little bit open, and that's where the rotations were key. Like when you watch the Serbian game, Serbia was rotating pretty well and kind of frazzled them or whatever. But, LeBron and all the guys that had the ball in their hands, they knew what they were doing and they know how to make good reads, which is why this team is really dangerous. The IQ is very, underrated, I think.
Yeah, and that was the tough part, for these other teams is, if you're going to put one guy on one guy and another guy and another guy. Let's say, Embiid's out there and he didn't play as much in this game, but say in some of the other games, right? You got to put a big guy on Embiid. And then you have to put, somebody on someone else. But then say like LeBron, what's the matchup for him? Because not every team had, like a big athletic physical guy that could kind of match up with him, right? I guess France had Gorshan Yabusele, but that wasn't necessarily the case for every team, right? Like even Serbia had some bigger guys, but they weren't necessarily, super athletic,
Sure.
Guys, right? They were more so just kind of taller, right? And then some of the other teams didn't have much size at all, right? Like Puerto Rico, and South Sudan and some of the other teams. But that's really kind of the key, like you said, is just the fact that all these guys are kind of able to play together and kind of use some of their best skill sets and their best traits, right, to make these fits work. Because like you said, like with Steph, he doesn't have to play point guard quite as much with LeBron on the roster, right? Like you said, they can play that 2-man game, and he can do what he does best, right? Which is be the greatest shooter ever, right? Obviously in the fourth quarter, right, it was give Steph the ball and get out of the way, right? Because France tried to make some changes where they put some of their bigger defenders out there, right, to kind of add more length. But obviously Steph still has a lot of quickness and shiftiness to his handle. And it doesn't matter if you put a tall guy on him, he can still shoot over them, if need be. So that was just kind of the coolest part to see. Obviously, as we mentioned in the live stream, it's going to be rough, for some of these guys when, the regular season starts and reality kicks in.
Yeah.
But, for now, obviously, you soak up the moment and enjoy the fact that you got the gold medal.
Yeah, and like even another point, we've already silenced this in last. I think we talked about it last season, and even a little bit during the regular season as well with both of these guys that I'm about to mention. But Braun and Curry, they're closers. I don't care what anybody says. I know there's been that sentiment around them their entire career that they're not closers, they're not clutch, they don't have the clutch gene. I don't care. I don't give two craps. These guys, they close, they know how to close, they know what they're doing, they're clutch. And I think, in terms of world basketball, this is the biggest stage, obviously, of the World Cup and stuff like that. But, to be able to close the games out like they did in the past two games to win in clutch gold, that I think that speaks volumes in itself for their legacies, like you already talked about with Steph.
Especially in a crazy environment like that, right, where you're, where the opposing team is on their home floor, basically, right? And so the whole crowd's behind them. And, shout out to the crowd for bringing a great environment, in that game. They were loud, they were on their feet, right? Every time France, made a comeback, right, they were, they went crazy. So that was awesome to see as well. And it's like, with that closing mindset, yeah, like you don't win multiple championships without having at least one time, where you have to show up in a big game more than one time.
And we never believed that they weren't closers. It was just, the majority of the NBA world has, for some reason, labeled these guys as not clutch, but we know the truth. If you know ball, you know the truth.
Yeah, you don't win multiple championships without coming up in big moments from time to time. Right?
Exactly.
Like nobody's necessarily going to be able to win every title just dogging everybody, right? That just doesn't normally happen.
Right.
Usually you have at least one moment. Because like even like with this team, right? Like in the earlier games, even though, the first quarter might have been close, then they would run the other teams out of the gym. But then, these last two games were a little bit more competitive. And in the case of the Serbia game, they were down almost the entire game.
Yeah.
Right. So you knew at a certain point there was going to be, a big game that they were going to need to kind of lock in and be prepared to show up in the big moments, and they did. So
it happens every Olympics, like even during Tokyo, like we were talking about it off camera, like everybody knows the Tokyo run was stained a little bit because they lost that big game that was going to be the tough one. Obviously they won gold, but that game against France was a huge, tarnishing blow, and we got revenge. Like, and that's the cool thing. And I'm really glad that they've dubbed this team the Avengers. I feel like it's very fitting, not just in terms of like the Marvel stuff, but I feel like in terms of what they actually accomplished, that's what I really feel like.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's kind of like you mentioned, that's the cool part, right? Because I think that was the first game, right, of that run, right, where they lost game one against France, and then everybody was like, "Oh no, here we go," right? And then I don't think they lost another game after that. So, I mean, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and that's kind of goes to show, like sometimes, like your first impression of something, once that happens, it's very hard, to kind of get out of that, right? Because I think that kind of goes into like you mentioned, the mindset of people with the closing narratives, right? Where, you see maybe one bad moment from them, right? Where say like LeBron, it's 2011, or say like for Steph, it's the 3-1 lead or
Sure.
whatever, right? And
Sure.
like so, and even though and then that just kind of sticks, even like years later, right? Even after multiple championships later, right? Like it doesn't matter, right? Like it's just kind of something that just kind of stays with people forever. But in the end, it's just kind of noise, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, that's kind of just online, terminally online narratives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so but it was still great to see, all these guys. And for the younger guys again, what a great experience for them. Even the guys that didn't necessarily play, like say Tyrese Halliburton barely played during this run. I
Hmm.
think it had come out that he had an injury, right? I think they had mentioned they had mentioned he had some type of leg or finger injury or something like
Hmm.
that, right? I don't know if
Okay.
it was tied. I'm not sure if it was tied to, the injury from the playoffs, but just kind of something to think about, right? Where it's just just some minor leg injury, right? According to Brian Windhorst, Halliburton's injury kept him off the floor during majority of Olympics. And then Tatum, right, didn't really play a whole lot, and that was the guy that was on the championship winning team, right? Now in this game, Derek White didn't play, but he played for a good chunk of it, and then Holiday played almost every game except for the one that he sat out due to injuries. But what did you think of that, right? In terms of like Halliburton and Tatum not really playing. I know, online a number of people have mentioned that Tatum just couldn't hit jumpers. And he did other stuff like get rebounds and defend. It didn't really cost them at all, but it's just kind of an interesting decision. And then for Halliburton, it just felt like you didn't really need him, just because you had other guards, and other than Steph, most of the other guards were more like kind of had more of defensive minded roles. I guess other than Edwards, but what did you think of those guys not really getting minutes?
Yeah, I mean, when it was first announced that Halliburton was going to be on the team, we were skeptical about the fit in terms of, how's it going to work with Anthony Edwards, even other guards, like Book, Curry,
Right.
even. And I feel like he was always the guy that was probably going to be the reserve for the team. That's kind of how it felt.
Right.
I don't think people were going into this Olympics and, looking at the roster and being like, yeah, Tatum's going to be a reserve. But that's how it kind of filled out. And I mean, look at what they were able to accomplish without him. That's what I will say. But I'm still going to be an advocate for the guy playing. I think he should have played, a lot more than he did because of the fact that he's a great rebounder. He's a phenomenal rebounder, for his position, power forward, small forward, whatever you want to call him. And, he's also a great playmaker, and his defense is elite as well. In the times that he did play, I thought that his, backside and weak side help defense was amazing, alongside the fact that he's able to grab boards, and he's a good passer. It's not like he's an imbecile when he has the ball. But like you said, the problem was the guy could not hit a single jump shot. Most of his points were, either layups, dunks, middies, or stuff like that. So unfortunate that he didn't get to play as much as I probably would have wanted him to. And it is kind of odd considering the fact that not necessarily like he's the face of the NBA or anything like that, but they've been propping him up a lot, with the Jordan campaign. He's on the cover of 2K, Sports Illustrated champion, most recent champion. So, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I think he should have played a little bit more, especially in the Serbian games, because at times they struggled with defense and they definitely struggled with rebounding.
Right. Yeah. Big three stats, just kind of just to reiterate some of it, right? LeBron averaged 14.7 rebounds, 8.5 assists. Stephen Curry averaged 15 points, 3 rebounds, 2.5 assists. And then Kevin Durant, 14 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. So a lot of balanced production, from those three guys. And those were kind of, again, the three main guys that led the way. I guess you can, if you want, you can add your 2 cents on the stats before, I kind of wrap it up with one more point.
Yeah, I mean, it's the three-headed monster. What were people dubbing it? The freaking the chef, the king, and what was Durant's? I think it was like Slim or something like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's dope. I mean, that trio, I think, like I said, it feels like something out of a dream. I already know that we have the dream team, but like I said, the Avengers is very fitting, for this squad, considering what they accomplished, and all three of those guys are great individually, but we just witnessed greatness in history, with all three of them being teamed up together for the first time.
Which guy is Ant-Man?
I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, no?
Yeah.
Ant-Man, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like LeBron, obviously, like Captain America. I don't want to go too far into it. I guess like Steph. I don't even know what Steph would be. I don't even know what KD would be. There's not a lot of obvious picks here.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, could Steph be like an Iron Man?
Maybe. I feel like Iron Man has the ego. I feel like Steph's ego isn't like through the roof enough, you know?
Okay, fair enough. Thor?
But that's maybe.
Right.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, but it's just kind of something to think about.
Yeah.
You know, and again,
I love the nickname of the team. I really do.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments, you know, maybe who you think who should be who in terms of the different superheroes, right?
True.
Or, you know, maybe you guys can come up with, you know, your lists of that. And then last but not least, I guess 2 more points. One, Joel Embiid, right? Do you think he comes back to Team USA in 2028? I know he kind of teased, you know, the idea of maybe he plays somewhere else, but do you think he ends up coming back to Team USA?
I feel like it's a 50-50 at this point. I feel like with this team, he was recruited. That was what was reported. You know, he was recruited to be here, which makes sense. You know, I don't really foresee him coming back if, you know, the team isn't nearly as star-studded as this one. And I feel like he might have something to prove by playing for Cameroon. I don't think, you know, Cameroon will win gold if he goes there, but you know, I think there's a chance for him to redeem, I guess, you know, his public image, if he even cares about it. But it seemed like he enjoyed and relished, you know, being booed throughout this entire Olympic run. So, and like you already talked about on the live stream, the guy is a career troll. So, you know, he could just come back in the next 4 years.
Yeah, and then yeah, like you said, I'm kind of 50-50 about that. We'll see. You know, because some of the other guys kind of mentioned whether or not they'd come back. It was mainly the older guys. You know, you assume the younger guys are all back. Guys that could be on it in 2028 that aren't on it right now. What are we thinking? You know, let's say we assume, not that this all happens, but let's say none of Steph, LeBron, or KD are on it in 2028. What guys do you think come in and probably replace them?
Kawhi.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
He'd be older. He'd be older too, I think.
But I feel like he would be there. Paolo.
Okay.
Third guy. I don't know. That's
Jaylen Brown. Do you think Jaylen Brown? Because it kind of sounded like from Grant Hill and I think others almost kind of like, yeah, you know, we'll give you a shot in 2028. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying he's going to be there, but do you think he ends up being there?
I mean, if he politely accepts, yeah. But I don't know, because I feel like there's not a lot of beef, but a little bit of bad blood, you know. But hey, they could figure that out and figure that relationship out, and he could end up being there. I think that's a good pick. But then also, I feel like you have to pick one of the young guys that's coming into the league at some point who's projected to be, you know, one of these next generational talents. Like you could look at, we already know who I'm going to say, Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey. What's the other one? Harper.
Ronnie James.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, another former NBA player's son, Harper. You know, so I think,
Harper?
Yeah, so I think that would be a good pick too, because I feel like he's also a sleeper to be one of the best players of that draft class. But I feel like you have to pick one of those elite young guys because, I mean, you see it with Edwards being on the team. So they're going to pick like one young guy, and it's got to be one of those three. Probably. I don't see it being, you know, like a freaking Scoot Henderson, in all honesty. Maybe Brandon Miller. That would be interesting.
Yeah. What about Jalen Brunson?
I mean, this might be a hot take, but I feel like his game doesn't translate that well to FIBA.
Right. And that's kind of what we talked about, where, you know, some of the guys that we saw in the World Cup a couple of years ago, you know, it didn't really, like Brandon Ingram, right? That was kind of one of the biggest culprits where it just felt like it didn't really work.
Yeah, like there's just some guys where it's not that like the ball dominant stuff doesn't work. I think it really comes down to getting foul calls too. The refereeing and officiating is completely different. Notice there was not a lot of flopping. In this FIBA stuff. And we know that there are some guys who kind of thrive on that. And I think Jalen Brunson is one of those guys, not necessarily flopping, but he knows how to exaggerate the call and kind of, you know, get to the line effectively. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's amazing with the ball in his hands and what he can do in the mid range. But just a little bit, I feel like his game is a little bit too ball dominant, if that makes sense. We know that he could play off the ball. We've seen him do it before, but I feel like he's just so much better with the ball in his hands, and that might be a little bit too much. But maybe there's like a way that they can, like, I guess, not necessarily build the roster around him, but, you know, maybe have like certain aspects of the roster be built around him, and maybe they can make it work. But for me, I just don't think he fits for FIBA.
Yeah, and I feel like that's probably what's going to happen, where they're going to probably look at some more fits because, you know, again, you have a lot of talent, but, you know, some of it isn't necessarily going to work because there are certain guys that play a little bit too contrasting of styles. You know, for it to be as like even like a Joel Embiid was fine in some of those games, but then there were other games where you could kind of see that, you know, if he wasn't, you know, getting the ball in good spots so he could score, then, you know, that was kind of limiting his effectiveness because it's just, you know, it's a, you know, not like you said, it's not that one-on-one ball dominant play styles can't work. It's just, it's kind of like it's more so in moments and spurts. But for some guys, that's, like you said, a big part of their offense, and it's kind of hard to kind of translate that unless, you know, you're a guy that can do other things when you don't have the ball offensively. And some of those guys can, but, you know, for other guys, they don't do it as much. Like, say, Brandon Ingram doesn't do as much stuff away from the ball. And if he could, right, then it wouldn't really matter, right? You know, because then that's what his role would be.
Yeah.
But if that's not something that he's really or others are as accustomed to, then that's where it's probably going to be a tall task for them.
Because Brunson's going to be 31. I feel like Donovan Mitchell, that could be a good pick. Ja Morant, holy, you know.
Right. Yeah, because there are guys that are really good that weren't available this year either because of injury or you know, obviously, you know, the recruiting part as well. So
yeah, but I think my top three guys, if we're going to replace LeBron, KD, and Steph, like I said, probably Paolo. I'm going to go Paolo, Brandon Miller, and probably Cooper Flagg. And
okay.
if we need to put a guard in there, probably Donovan Mitchell. But I feel like one of those other guards is going to be really, really good. You know,
right.
in 4 years. So, you know, because they're going to have probably Book. They're going to have Book. They're going to have Anthony Edwards. They're going to have Tyrese Halliburton will probably be back. So.
Right. Do you think Holiday or White are going to be back?
I don't think both of them will be back. Maybe one. Or there could be another guy that just like comes out of nowhere. But if we're talking about like replacing the 3 stars, then I don't know. That's tough. But I mean, I feel like probably Derek White comes back, but I don't think Drew comes back. Because how old would Drew Holiday be?
Holiday, I mean, he's already, I want to say 33, right?
Yeah, so he'd be 37.
He's 34. He turned 34, so he's going to be he'd be 38.
I don't see that. Not he's an Iron Man, like don't get me wrong, like that guy he's normally pretty healthy, but I don't know. I think I don't know. I'd probably take D White.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's probably more likely that White might come back just because of the age. Even though Holiday has more cachet.
Yeah.
Just age-wise. Because, I mean, Derek White, I mean, I know he's already, I think, 30, right? Yeah, he's already 30. So he's about 3 years younger, 4 years younger than Holiday. So, you know, by the time 2028 rolls around, he'd be 34.
Yeah.
But, you know, how good is he going to be in 4 years? Like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, does AD play in 4 years? Like, there's so many guys that I feel like would be gone. I don't know.
I think he said he's probably going to be back.
Because how old is AD?
He's 31, so I think he'd be 35 by that point.
Okay. Yeah, because, I mean, I've seen lists going around on the internet. Some are interesting. Like, some people have Chet Holmgren there, and I'm like, maybe.
Yeah, because some of these younger guys, if they take crazy leaps,
that's my point.
You never know.
Like, they might surpass AD, you know, in terms of peak.
Yeah, you never know. Like a Kyle. Yeah, you never know. Like a Kyle Filipowski or somebody like that could be, you know, on Team USA 4 years from now. You just never know.
No, he lost me there. Like, I feel like a sleeper candidate is going to be Zion. If that guy is healthy, oh my God, could you imagine Zion in the Olympics?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's just the question is how realistic is it for him to be healthy?
Probably not realistic.
Right. Think Jaren Jackson Jr. could come back?
No. Like I said, of the guys that I mentioned, it would probably be like Paolo, Coop, Brandon Miller, and then, like I said, guard, probably Donovan Mitchell. Guess you could throw in Chet Zion for honorable mentions, maybe Brunson, but I just feel like Brunson, like I said, no hate towards Brunson. I think he's an awesome player, one of the best in the NBA.
Could a Tyrese Maxey be there, you think?
Yeah, if he takes the leap that I'm expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But will he? I don't know.
No, I don't know.
Because I'm telling you, it's hard to predict this stuff. Like, we're going off based off potential, you know?
Yeah, Cade Cunningham. I mean,
I'm sorry. Can I quick note on Cade? I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like he's been very underwhelming individually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That could be me. I mean, yeah, we'll probably get to that when we do break down Detroit. But for me personally, like I said, individually, I think he's been piss poor, but I get it. The team that he's been surrounded with throughout his entire career thus far has been horrible. But I don't know. I just feel like false advertising. Yeah, I liked what I saw in college and high school, but in the league, I don't know. The jumpers.
I think this year, I feel like is going to probably have to be, the year where we kind of see, what it looks like. Because, not that we expect Detroit to be a playoff team. And like you said, we'll get there when we get there. But, now that they've added more shooters, and presumably you have a few more guys that, have a year or two under their belts, in theory, they should be better, right? Because it's not like a team like the Wizards or Portland, right, that just became really bad, over the last year or two. Right, they've been bad for a while, right? They've been accumulating, top 5 picks for years at this point. So, at a certain point, you're gonna have to find a way to break through, and probably the easiest pathway to break through is if Cade can kind of, reach that next level. Because if he can get there, then that's probably what's gonna be the best way to elevate the team. And obviously, there's only so much he can do, but that's kind of where it probably is going to have to start. But then, also like the rest of the roster, we'll see. But, don't want to spend too much time on it. But it is a good point to bring up because, it's not like, because he's, in year 4, I think already, right? Or because, I mean, he got his big extension, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So he's kind of at a point now where, he's no longer like a 19, 20-year-old rookie. He's still young. He's 22. I think he'll be 23 when the season starts. But, this is year 4 for him.
Yeah.
I mean, year 2, he didn't play a whole lot because he was hurt. But this is going to be a big year for him.
Yeah.
So, now now that we're done with Team USA, now it's kind of straight off-season talk. For the rest of the way. Unless something big happens. Which we'll obviously talk about if they ever happen at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But also, just a quick note: shout out to the women's team as well for bringing home the gold, right? They won, I think, by a point, right? I think it was like, 67, 66 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Gabby Williams for France, right? She had a chance to tie the game, and I think, she wasn't behind the line. She was inside the 3-point line. So the bank shot ended up not tying the game. They ended up losing by 1. That game, was a lot closer than I think you would have expected, but
yeah, for sure.
because they've won. I mean, because they've won like 8 straight golds.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Because they're the level of talent they have there, is very good. So
yeah, and shout out to Asia Wilson. I think I think she won the MVP. So awesome stuff for her.
Yeah, and I think Kalia Copper, I think, was the one that kind of closed the game in that one, if I'm not mistaken.
And then Taurasi, I think, has how many Olympic gold medals does she have? I think it's a crap ton. It's more than KD. I think it's 6 or 7. Is it 6 or 7?
I mean, I mean, it's up there because I mean she's been playing. I mean, geez, since what 2004 in the WNBA. I mean, I want to say she has like maybe 5.
Okay.
6 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
so she has 6.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was either 5 or 6. I think the first one she got was 2004.
Yeah,
she was because they won gold in 2004 in Athens.
Yeah, so she is 6. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and then I think they had the World Cups. I think she has 4 of those as well.
Yeah.
Or no, I think she has 3 gold, 1 bronze because they got a bronze I think in one of those.
Okay.
Yeah,
amazing.
Like 2006.
Amazing.
Yeah. So now on to the next part, Charlotte Hornets continuing the Southeast Division. What a
Oh my
blunder
God.
we made with that team last season. Because this was a team that we thought would be a lot better. To be fair, there is context where they had a ton of injuries, but they went 21-61. Very bad. Um, not good at all. But take a look at the games played with a number of these guys, right? You look at LaMelo Ball, who's their best player. He only played in 22 games, right? He averaged 24 points, 8 assists, 2 steals. I remember talking about early in the season where he wasn't playing well, and I was like, why isn't this guy playing well? Because I think he was in year 4. He was going, he had just been paid, that huge crazy extension, $200+ million, and then he picked it up. Then right as he picked it up, he got hurt. Look around, Terry Rozier, only 30 games. Obviously, he was traded, before the deadline. Gordon Hayward, 25 games. PJ Washington was on this team, right? Mark Williams, who was their starting center, 19 games played. The most games played for this team, I believe, was Brandon Miller, who played in 74. And then I think after that was Miles Bridges, who played in 69 games. And then after that, Nick Richards, backup center. So you already know that's not great.
Right.
So only 4 guys played 60 or more games. So that's not great. Really kind of a tale of two halves, sort of, right, from the perspective of what the team initially started off as and then what it ended up being. They did a good job at the deadline, right, where they kind of were able to move on from some guys on the roster, guys like Gordon Hayward, guys like PJ Washington, and they brought in some other guys like Grant Williams, Trey Mann as well, right? So, they had some interesting stretches the latter part of the season, but they stunk, right? But then you look at their offseason, and they did some things that we didn't necessarily expect, some which we knew was coming, and then other things which weren't necessarily expected. Obviously, one of the things that we knew was going to happen was they hired a new coach, right? Obviously, Steve Clifford, right? He no longer is coaching the team. I think he moved into more of an advisory role, if I'm not mistaken. And they hired Charles Lee to be their head coach, right? Who was an assistant for Boston, right? And obviously, they just came off of winning the title, right? So we'll see what he'll be able to do over there, right? Obviously, they also had a change in ownership, right? Because Jordan initially owned the team, and then he became a minority owner, right? I think there were 2 other guys that that also own part of it, and now they own the majority of it.
Mm-hmm.
So big changes there as well. But in terms of the actual team moves, right? They made a draft pick, right? Salon, right? Tion Salon. From coming overseas from France, right? He was drafted 6th overall. He had kind of shot up on a lot of people's draft boards, right? Kind of a versatile, athletic forward, right? He's a tall dude, right? 6'8", 6'9". So we'll see what he does. I feel like he's probably going to be a little bit of a project, I think, right? Where not that he's going to be horrible right away, but I think it'll take a little bit of time before we can really see what he's going to become, right? Because we know with this draft, this was not a draft that was considered to have a ton of superstar level guys, all-star level guys, more so guys that can kind of play a role. If he can play a role, ideally as a rookie, can he play some defense? Can he get some rebounds? Because when you look at this Charlotte team, that's kind of a lot of what they just don't really have, right? They have a lot of good offensive players, not a lot in terms of defense, right? So that's something that's kind of been a problem with the team for a long time, right? That's one of probably the main reason why they've been so bad, other than injuries, of course. But you look around. I guess one of the lone bright spots last year was Brandon Miller, right? Who was a guy that was much maligned after getting drafted right over Scoot Henderson, right? He was drafted number 2 overall, but he had a great rookie season, right? And kind of showed, why he was drafted number 2 overall, and why the people that kind of doubted him probably shouldn't have doubted him, right? He averaged 17 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 44 from the field, 37 from 3, flashing all of those skills as a 6'9" forward, right? You hope with a healthy LaMelo Ball that he'll look better. And he wasn't even bad at all. But, just obviously you hope that 2-man game can kind of continue to grow, right? You look around also, they re-signed Miles Bridges, right, to a 3-year deal, right? First year, $27 million, second year, $25 million, third year, $22 million. So it goes down per year, right? Obviously, he's been a controversial guy for that team for, very obvious reasons. They also brought in Josh Green, right? Josh Green came over from Dallas, right? That was in that big 6-team Klay Thompson deal, right? Where Klay went to Dallas, right? Obviously, the Warriors got their guys. We don't have to go into all of that, but Josh Green, right? He went over to Charlotte, and that's going to be kind of interesting, I think, to see just because of the fact that, in an ideal world, is he going to be the starting guard next to LaMelo Ball, right? Because that's a guy where if everything with him clicks, that can be a guy that can hit some, shots from the outside, maybe not at a completely consistent rate, but he's improved from where he was as a rookie. A guy that is a good athlete. He can play some defense, and he's got a little bit of he's got a little bit of a fight to him, right? Obviously, he was on Dallas and had some moments where he looked really good. Now eventually it kind of reared its ugly head as you got towards the end of the playoffs, but he's also a young guy. And now he's going to be in a different situation, right? Because he went from starting to then he was kind of coming off the bench and playing a role. But I'm very curious to see what he looks like, alongside LaMelo Ball. Because obviously you're no longer going to be playing with the same caliber of high-level stars because you're not playing next to Luka and Kyrie. But LaMelo's a good passer in his own right. So in theory, this should be the archetype of player that should be a good fit next to, LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, right? Just like a guy that can hit some shots, get out in transition, ideally play some defense. Because you need that. Because Charlotte just does not have that. And then Mark Williams, what does he look like in year 3? Because he barely played last year, right? He had a really good rookie year. Didn't do much last year because he didn't play. So, there are some guys to kind of look at the roster. They also traded for Micic, right? At the deadline, right? Who we just saw play for Serbia, right? In the Olympics. So Seth Curry they brought back. Taj Gibson they brought in, I guess, for some veteran locker room leadership, right? Still getting some NBA checks, so that's cool to see. So offseason wise, they did, I mean, they're great. I mean, I don't really feel like it's, I really feel like that they did a decent job for the most part the offseason. I'm not going to say they had they won the offseason, but just given the circumstances, I guess, you look at the draft pick, there's questions with it. But I don't necessarily hate the pick just from the perspective of you hope that he can be more of a defensive rebounding type guy, which they just don't really have at all. Josh Green, bringing him in, I think that's pretty cool because I feel like, because before you had Terry Rozier and LaMelo Ball, and Rozier is obviously the better player, but he also was going to cost a lot of money, and you just didn't really need him long term, right? If you're Charlotte, you're in kind of a different spot where you're kind of rebuilding, right? But you've also already kind of accumulated some other young guys, so it's kind of time to start looking at who actually can be a decent part of this future rotation, for years to come. And then obviously they also got a new coach. They changed the ownership, so it feels like things might be trending in the right direction. So I guess I'll probably say B minus, something like that. I mean, I don't really feel like there's like a pathway for them to have really had a much better offseason because they did a lot at the deadline to put themselves in this position anyways. So if you combine the trade deadline and the offseason together, you could give them like a B plus just because they got out of those horrible contracts and created the cap to re-sign Miles Bridges, bring in Josh Green, obviously do what they did in the draft. So that's fine. I just don't really feel like what would I have really expected? You know what I mean? Like, I don't really feel like there's a world where they would have gotten an A plus because they're just not that type of team, I don't think, where they can really get an A plus offseason. But this is probably as close to the best possible type of outcome you could get, more than likely. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on how you view Solana as a draft pick, but I would probably say like a B, B minus, because there's ways that it could have gone worse. Like I guess you could say like they could have done a little bit better in some areas, but I'm just not sure which one. So I feel like it's kind of hard for me to really beat them down like that. So I'm going to kind of settle with a B.
Okay, that's interesting. I liked the things that they did that weren't really basketball related. So
okay,
the head coach, I love that change.
And that's kind of how I settled on that because I included that in as well.
Yeah, and I also love the lead executive hire, Jeff Peterson. So he's going to be their president of basketball operations. He's also, the former assistant general manager of the Brooklyn Nets. So he's the guy who kind of orchestrated KD, Kyrie, getting there as free agents, trading for James Harden, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and also played a huge factor in drafting Cam Thomas and Nick Claxton. So
I'll be waiting for them to sign KD when his contract ends.
yeah, right. But
Or trade for Steph.
yeah, but in terms of like what he's been able to do, I think, what he brings is like a certain level of seriousness with the scouting, because I think that's something that Charlotte has really struggled with in years past, as we can clearly tell. A lot of their guys just haven't really panned out, a lot of the young ones. But in terms of the roster is currently constructed, I like a lot of their pieces. I think, they made a couple of, A+ moves in this offseason, and they also have a bunch of A+ guys. The problem is I feel like they just didn't do enough. I'm very skeptical, excuse me, on their draft picks. They drafted 2 people. Salon, who high risk, very high reward. Because if he turns out to be like one of those elite 2-way wings, all right, cool. I love the pick, but he has no ball handle. And his passing IQ is not really there in decision making and stuff like that. A lot of forced shots if you look at the tape. But then they also drafted KJ Simpson. I feel like that. Yeah. So 2nd round pick, but I mean, could pan out, but also probably won't do too much.
Right.
You look at their roster.
Why I got it 2-way, I think.
Exactly. You look at their roster. They have Nick Smith Jr., who I'm a little bit higher on after seeing the summer league and stuff like that. But I'm really looking at their 2 main guys, who seem to be Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, and potentially Mark Williams could be their big 3. But good Lordy, it's just, I don't know if I have a lot of faith in their ability to stay healthy. I don't think they did nearly enough to improve as a team. But that's not really, I guess, the direction. I feel like this is more of a retool than a rebuild. You're kind of looking to rotate certain personnel in, because I think you have 2 very solid building blocks in LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, but it's kind of like, what do we do to surround these guys with elite talent? I don't think they've done that thus far. I think you can see the vision, where you have a freak athlete like Miles Bridges. You have glue guys like Grant Williams. Then obviously Mark Williams seems like he's, on his way to being a very good center in the league. So the question is health. So I'd probably give them a C, because I feel like the off the court stuff is amazing in terms of hiring, these 2 great hirings. But then I look at the draft and it's like kaput, the free agents kaput. So I'm not really too high on the Josh Green one. I like the Bridges re-signing.
Right.
They also waived and re-signed Curry.
Yeah, Seth Curry, yeah.
Okay.
Probably like a veteran locker room guy.
But even then, like, all right. I mean, he's been there and they've still haven't been very serious. But that's why I'm hoping that the whole coaching, hiring, and, the executive can carry this. But that part is like A+, and the rest is kind of like D. So I guess it would even out to being like a C.
And that's why, like, both you and I are like, yeah, it's hard to give them anything higher than like a B, just because of the fact that, like you said, it really depends on how much can you believe in what they did in the draft, and then, like you said, do you really believe that this core of guys can really do anything going into next season? Because that's really kind of the question mark here. Because LaMelo Ball, now he's getting paid to be basically like a superstar type guy. And he just has not been healthy enough to really be that, right? Because we know he can be good, but we don't get enough games of him really being good, because, I mean, you look at his games played, on a season-to-season basis. Rookie year, 51 games, which, again, to be fair, that was during, one of those shortened seasons, right? I want to say I think that was the 72-game season or whatever, right? So he missed 20 games there, so that's not really that bad. And then 75 games the following season, right? That was when he was an all-star, so that's great. But then after that, 36 games, which is awful. And then followed that up with an even more impressive 22 games played only, right?
Yeah.
So that's a major problem. So you're talking about in, 3 out of his 4 seasons, he's missed basically at least 20 plus games, right? Which is a decent chunk of the season. I mean, 20 games is a quarter of the season. So, that's kind of the rough part there. And then after that, Miller, right? You assume he's ascending. but then you just don't really know with the rest of the group. Like Miles Bridges, probably kind of is what he is at this point, which, he's a good player. But, again, how much, how much does it really factor long term for them, right? Is he really the type of player that they really need for this type of roster, right? And then Mark Williams could be really good, but he doesn't play enough, again, like LaMelo, for us to really know. We've seen flashes of it, right? Like his rookie season, he was pretty good, as a doing the things that you would kind of want in a center for this team playing next to LaMelo Ball. You don't need, a guy that you're dumping the ball into in the post and running a ton of offense for. Just a guy that can run the floor, get rebounds, block shots, things like that. But he just hasn't been available. So that's kind of really the issue there. But yeah. So over under for this team, what do you think it is?
If we're factoring in health, I could see them being, if Brandon Miller takes that leap, or not a leap, but a jump.
Right.
Mark Williams stays healthy, Melo stays healthy, and looks like an all-star. I could see them winning like 40 games.
Yeah, their over-under is 29.5.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I feel like none of those things, there's only one thing that is going to happen, and I think it's going to be Brandon Miller taking that jump.
Right.
I don't think Mark Williams is healthy, and I definitely don't think LaMelo Ball is going to be healthy. So 29, I think, is perfect. Right. That's a perfect estimate.
The question is it over or under?
That's a good question.
Because this is another one where it almost feels like it's kind of the sweet spot where, that's probably going to be somewhere around how many games they win. But then is it more likely that, because I feel like if it's over, it's probably like not much more than like
one.
Like a couple of games.
I was gonna say I think they win 30. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. And that
you're going over.
Yeah, and I know I'm probably gonna
flight over.
Yeah, that's probably gonna come back to bite me in the butt, just like how it did with us. This season, where that team completely imploded. Yeah, it's the team that we can't quit, because I feel like we're holding on to that sentiment, like, oh my God, they should be like the Memphis Grizzlies of the East. Like they were that young, hungry team, shut out in the play-in, and they were supposed to go to the playoffs, but then everything blew up because everybody gets hurt. But yeah, I could see them winning 30 games if all things go according to plan, but I doubt that it'll go according to plan.
I guess the question is, so which team do you think finishes with a better record? Do you think is it Charlotte or is it Atlanta?
Atlanta.
I agree.
I think Trae Young has proven a lot more than LaMelo Ball.
I agree with that too. And
I think Atlanta has a little bit more. They have a little bit more of a system and construction, I think, going on there. Like, I feel a little bit more confident about Atlanta, even though I still think they're both going to be not too great. But
what about Charlotte or Toronto?
That's a good one. I feel like they're right about even, if you want me to be honest. But I have more faith in Charlotte because of the upside. I think if you have a guy like LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, and they're both, healthy, playing at their peak alongside Mark Williams, I think that's a good starting point, because I feel like Charlotte is a little bit deeper than Toronto, but I do feel, because Toronto does have Scotty Barnes, Scotty or Barney, as he likes to call himself. And then you also have RJ Barrett, IQ. Yeah. I feel like I'm taking Charlotte. Yeah, I'm taking Charlotte over that, if you want me to be honest.
You're too Grady.
Yeah, true. I'm still taking Charlotte, I think.
Right. And that's the funny thing, is that their over-unders, Charlotte's at 29.5, Toronto's at 30.5.
Yeah.
So
around
they're basically
the same.
As being around the same.
That makes sense.
And I think, like you said, I think it has to do with the guys at the top of the roster. And then combined with what do we actually expect from those two teams.
Right.
Because like you said, with Charlotte, probably has the higher upside, but we know that they're probably not going to be healthy. If they shock us and they all end up being pretty healthy and they play 60 games each,
that's a play-in team, at least.
Yeah, that's probably a play-in team in the East. But
if they're healthy, it wouldn't surprise me if they face like Atlanta in the play-in. Really.
Right. Yeah, because if they can be somewhat healthy, I'm sure, because Chicago will fall, so they could probably take that 9-10 spot, depending on what happens with some of the other bad Eastern Conference teams that might be better,
Yeah.
but we'll see.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like with Charlotte, again, there are some things to like about their offseason, but also some other things to be a little bit, like you said, skeptical about. And that's where it kind of rounds out to, somewhere between, for me a B, for you a C, right? That it kind of rounds out to that area, right? Where it's like it's not a bad offseason by any means, but a lot of it really depends on some of the other question marks. Do those question marks pan out? Because, like, let's say Josh Green has a really good year for Charlotte, then that looks a lot better than it would have, kind of at face value, right? If Salon, right, has, like a decent first year, not in terms of like crazy stats, but just in terms of impact, that will be cool. What's like a good year for him, like in terms of numbers?
Who, Salon?
Yeah. Like 10-6?
Bro, he's not averaging 6 rebounds.
10-5?
Realistically, he's going to probably average
Like 4.
5 and 3, 5 points, 3 rebounds. But a great year because the thing is, I like him. I just don't like him for Charlotte. I like him other places. I would have preferred him go to San Antonio. That's where I had him mocked, but it is what it is. But ideally, like, what do I think he can realistically average? Like, being serious and, saying that he has a good season.
Right.
10-4, 10-3, 10-4,
Okay.
10-3.
So like around the same, just less rebounds. And that's, like we said, that's a good year for him.
Yeah.
That's like
I don't expect him to average 12.
Best case scenario, pie in the sky. That's like a good year, right? Like you said, if it's 5 and 3, yeah, we got an issue.
But I think that's what he's going to do, because if you look at his frame, his body's not NBA ready yet, in my opinion. I think
and there's always kind of a question about guys that kind of blow up and rise up the ranks really quickly, because
tell me about
sometimes, because sometimes you catch them at the right time. Yeah, because sometimes you catch them at the right time, but then that's not what you end up actually getting, in their rookie season. But then there are other guys where they are actually, exponentially getting better, and then they're going to look a lot better than you probably would have expected. So, that's kind of, and I'm not sure which one is more likely, but I feel like, given the fact that, him climbing up the ranks so quickly, but I still feel like he's kind of raw in some spots, I think it's probably a little bit more likely that he probably starts the year off probably, maybe he has like a game or two where it's really eye-popping, but I feel like he's probably going to have like I don't know if underwhelming is the right word, but probably like a year where it's like, I wish we would have gotten a little bit more.
I think he's going to be better down the line, but don't expect a lot from his rookie season, bro.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, and then, are there other angles to kind of look at Charlotte from, or is it kind of like we're done here? I mean, I guess LaMelo Ball, kind of like, what is he? I mean, what do we even expect from him, this season? Like, is he actually, a max All NBA? Well, maybe All NBA is too high, but you know what I mean? Like, is he, like, does it feel realistic that down the line he could be an actual foundation for a team?
Yeah, I think he is that at the moment. The problem is the health, man, and it pisses me off, because like you already talked about, talent-wise he's amazing, but health-wise, one of, if not the worst in the league at that, in terms of, what's going on with his health. And it seems like it's all lower body issues, ankle, feet, leg, something along those lines. And it's unfortunate, because that's something that doesn't normally get corrected.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just freak situations where it's like him landing on like a camera guy, or
literally,
also he's got a slight frame, so that's, I guess part of it too. But yeah, that's the rough part, because I'm kind of with you where I think that there is, I think there is another level he could get to, because we saw it, in the second year, but Charlotte's been such a mess. And I think that's where, like you said, hiring the front office guys that they brought in should add another level of seriousness to this team. And they brought in some veterans on the roster as well, which I think should, in theory, help, like a Taj Gibson or a Seth Curry, right? Maybe they don't put up, like huge regular season numbers or anything, but I'm sure those guys, who've been on a decent number of, of teams at different points should be able to share some knowledge, with some of the younger players.
Yeah, and I feel like they're also probably being brought in not just for the starters, but for the bench, because I think the bench is something that is a little sneaky. You got Trey Mann. You're probably going to have Salon coming off the bench. Micic as well. Devontae Graham is there too, so I'm intrigued. So, Nick Smith Jr.
Devontae Graham, I thought he was in Portland.
Devontae Graham's in Portland?
Yeah.
Not on ESPN.
Really?
I don't know.
Because the other day, maybe a week or whatever ago, they mentioned that he had signed with Portland.
Okay, yeah, on Google it says he's on Portland, but I don't know, for some reason on ESPN he's on their roster, but
I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird, but I think their bench is solid in terms of like Trey Mann, Josh Green,
right,
Amari Bailey potentially. I don't know.
And that's the thing is that they got rid of some Book Knight, right? That was a guy that they drafted.
Oh God, yeah.
And that did not pan out.
Yeah,
right at all. And that's kind of rough because they've had a number of first round picks that were not all that great. Yeah. So I guess kind of one final point before we move on. What's the starting five for this team? Because I'm sure we're gonna assume LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams are for sure in there. Miles Bridges as well, right? So who's the fifth guy?
Probably right? Josh Green.
Josh Green? Yeah, because that's kind of what I'm looking at from the perspective of if he can actually be good, on both ends of the floor, that could possibly be like a good fit, and he's not like a super expensive player or anything like that because you already have a bunch of scorers.
Yeah, because and you have scoring off the bench too, like Nick Smith Jr. and Trey Mann. They're literally both scorers. So,
right. So, and that's a good point where like in theory you should have a number of different guys to be able to put out there, but it's just I can't quit this team, but at the same time, I agree. I'm gonna keep my expectations low, but I feel like they could probably I think they can get to 30 games or 30 wins. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of like. What does Charlotte view as a successful year for this team? Because I feel like they would view a successful year like a play-in team. I don't think 30 wins where you're like 11 or 12 or something like that would probably be seen as a good thing. I think they would look at it more so like, can we get to upper 30s, or something like that, like 37, so that way we can, be closer to 9-10.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they should probably look at a play-in appearance as a success.
They were in the play-in at different points, a few years ago, right? They had back-to-back play-in appearances. They lost and got pummeled, but they've already kind of been there, done that, right? As we won 30 games, so now we're a bad team that doesn't look bad.
Exactly.
Right? Like now you want to be closer to being like an actually decent team.
Yep.
Yeah, so, again, let us know your thoughts in the comments, about Charlotte in terms of what you thought about their offseason, what your expectations are for them this year. Again, they should be better, but we thought they'd be better last year, and, that didn't happen. But, again, to be fair, lots of guys that missed a ton of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple of things happened, right? News, rumors going on around the league. Not a ton, right? But just in terms of, like, a few things. We'll mention them first, I guess, the Christmas games, right? Shams Charania, right? He, had leaked. I guess they had gotten hold of, I'm sure the NBA had nothing to do with the leaks, but, regardless, the Christmas games, have come out. So, you look at them, you got Spurs, Knicks, Minnesota, Dallas, Sixers, Celtics, Lakers, Warriors, and then Nuggets, Suns. What are your thoughts about those games?
I like Spurs Knicks. I think that's going to be intriguing. A little bit random, but I'll take it. Minnesota Dallas. I think that's going to be a feature one. Obviously considering who you have it. The leading and headlining it with Anthony Edwards and Luka Doncic. Playoff rematch as well. So that should be really cool. Philly at Boston. I think that one's going to be interesting because a lot of people are touting Philly as a powerhouse. Boston, obviously, we already know what they are. Lakers, Golden State. Awesome. We always love to see LeBron, Curry, duel. I think those are always very entertaining. Nuggets at Phoenix. That is the one that's intriguing to me.
Right.
Because I think, you could look at it from multiple angles. Russ is going to be on Denver. Obviously, that's not the reason why that's that's the freaking headline. I don't know why I started with that, but regardless, Russ versus KD, that's always a fun battle to watch a little bit. But I'm also intrigued, how does Phoenix handle Denver? I think that's going to be one of those teams that they potentially struggle against defensively. But I think that's the one that I'm kind of like, okay, I could get down with that one.
Yeah, kind of looking at it, from all these angles, right? The Knicks, usually almost always have a Christmas game, and now they're actually a really good team, so that'll be cool. And you got Wemby going against them, and they had some great matchups last year, right? That was the game where Brunson had 60 and Wemby had a 40-point, whatever of a game.
40-point whatever is crazy.
Yeah, I mean it was nuts. Because that latter part of the season, I mean, every night he was just
he was exploding.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wolves Dallas, as you already mentioned, right? That's a conference finals rematch, and both teams made moves to try to improve themselves, so that'll be cool to see. Philly Boston, I think the only thing that's unfortunate is that it's unlikely Porzingis plays, right? So that's gonna be something that kind of takes a little bit of the wind out of it. But the main marquee guys, presumably are going to be playing as long as they're all healthy. Which outside of Embiid, I guess you don't really have as many concerns for Tatum or Brown. I guess Paul George is kind of a question mark, but he was healthy last year, so we'll see. Lakers, Warriors, and Nuggets, Suns. It's kind of interesting to look at it from those angles, because usually the Lakers and Warriors have their own matchups against other teams, but this time they're playing each other. I think that probably kind of speaks a little bit to how those teams are going to be looked at next season, right? And obviously we'll have off-season odds for those teams as well, because there's a decent number of things to say for those teams. But as you mentioned, yeah, Steph and LeBron, those are always fun matchups, for sure. And then Nuggets Suns is kind of interesting, because there's been a decent amount of talk about both of these teams from the perspective of, there's a lot of people who feel like that the Nuggets are a lot worse than they had been in the last couple of years, and that the Suns now are, much better. There's a lot of people that are kind of looking at the Suns as like, maybe they moved over. I'm not kidding.
I know.
There's a lot of people that are kind of looking at the Suns from the perspective of, now with the addition of Tyus Jones, they might have actually, leaped over the Nuggets, right? In terms of being like an actual contender. I'm telling you, there's a lot of people that are really, really high, on the Suns as an actual contender because of, I guess, the addition of Tyus Jones, being a point guard for that team. But that's going to be something to kind of look at. And obviously it's one regular season game. And last year, to be fair, right, I think, in that season series, I want to say they split, because we had some good games against those two teams. But just kind of an interesting angle to look at, because I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of people that are much higher on the Suns now. And it feels like with the Nuggets, they're kind of in this weird stage where now they're, I don't know if underrated is the right term, but it might be, it might be that, just from the perspective of, with the guys that they've lost the last couple of seasons, it feels like most people are not picking them at all really to win the West for the most part. And it feels like there's a lot more people jumping onto the Suns train.
I mean, Jokic is that guy. I think you have questions about, number one, obviously no KCP, so who steps into that role? You add in Russ, does that work? And also Jamal Murray, we already talked about it. The guy has not looked good, really, since the postseason of last season. So he didn't look good in the Olympics as well. Exactly. So yeah, not good. With Phoenix though, KD's my guy. That's my GOAT, my personal GOAT, personal favorite player. But that team is not good. And I'm just being real. The bench is bad. Like, I follow the Suns probably just as much as I follow the Wizards because of KD. No. Trust me, you don't. That, I'm telling you, people did not watch Wizards basketball if they think that Tyus Jones is the answer to the problems. He's going to make you worse defensively, and he shrinks. I'm just saying. And that's not like a knock on his game, because we already know what he can do as a floor general and a facilitator, but it's the other things that I have big concerns about. Like, yeah, the counting stats look great. Like, it's like 40% from the 3-point line. Like, yeah, on paper, that's the perfect addition for Phoenix. No. Right. Watch the games, and then we can talk about what Tyus Jones brings to Phoenix.
I just like him better as a backup.
Me too.
But I also understand the perspective of, well, when you got three $50 million players, sometimes you're going to have to end up sliding guys who are better as backups into that starting five. But
Sure. I mean,
yeah,
I agree 100%, but yeah, they did in theory get a little bit better because now they have a true point guard, but it does, trust me, Denver is better than Phoenix.
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of with you honestly. I mean, to be honest, I was not that high on Phoenix last year. I know a lot of people were, but I think they'll probably be better, but I don't really see a world where they hold up, the trophy. I mean, again, like what's more likely? Is it more likely that they win the title or that they go out in the first round again? And I'm not saying they're going to go out in the first round again. I'm just saying what's more likely.
First round.
Yeah.
I don't see them winning a title. You got there's so many problems over there, and I
Right.
don't even, we can get into that for their off-season breakdown, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not going to divulge into that right now.
Um. Around the league, we got Adrian Wojnarowski putting out that Shvi Mikhailuk, right, NBA champion for the Boston Celtics, 4-year, $15 million deal with the Utah Jazz. So again, obviously now they've re-signed Lauri Markkanen, right, to that big max extension, right, renegotiated and extended. And now I think there's some guys that were kind of waiting for Markkanen, and now they're going to sign. And you're also adding Shvi Mikhailuk, right, bringing in some championship experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a game-changing move. I think, obviously now the Utah Jazz will be the favorites to win the championship. Yeah, absolutely not. But in all seriousness, no, I think, that he's a good addition.
Mhm.
And I think I think it furthers the level of seriousness that Utah is kind of approaching this offseason with, kind of similar to Charlotte, where you kind of seeing, you know, I think the first time in a long time since the Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, movings that, they're trying to win eventually, or they're trying to build the base foundation for that. And I think, adding championship pedigree to a roster that's been frankly unserious for the past couple of years is always a good thing.
Again, it's a very inexpensive. I mean, it's a long-term deal, but it's inexpensive. And again, I'm not sure if the more specific details have been put out. So it's possible that, there's some other caveats where it's like, oh, only the first year is guaranteed or, only whatever. Because that's always kind of what tends to happen, right? Remember, I think it was Jock Landale last year, right, where he signed like a 4-year deal, but only the first year I think was guaranteed. So,
Yeah.
that's and so that's kind of what tends to happen is after a while, once these details are reported. And again, it's not even a bad contract because it's not a lot of money. It's a lot of years, but I mean, 4 years, 15 million. I mean, you're talking about like what? Like, I mean, basically like 4 million a year. So I mean, like that's not really
Yeah.
much of anything.
Yeah, that's
So
fine.
yeah. Um. Also, I guess to kind of conclude. So according to Jake Fisher, Jonathan Kaminga is reportedly seeking a full max Warriors contract, right? So according to him, he's entering the final year of his rookie deal, where the word around the league from various sources is that Kaminga and his representation are looking for a full max extension. So that would be, you're talking about what is it like the 5 years, 224, $1 million max, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
If he can play like that, I'm cool with it. But if he doesn't,
Yeah.
absolutely not. I'm sorry. And that's no hate, but I feel like he's one of those guys that can potentially be a late bloomer, but I'm not too high on paying for late bloomers, if you want me to be honest. I feel like late bloomers thrive in environmental change. And that's sometimes what it takes, where you see guys, maybe they stunk in their first, 3 or 4 years with a team. They don't get
Right.
extended, they get moved, or they sign somewhere else. Boom. Holy cow, you're elite. It's kind of like Lauri Markkanen. In terms of late bloomers is what I mean. Like,
Right.
wasn't too amazing in Chicago, was okay in Cleveland, and then boom, explodes onto the scene in Utah. So it just takes a change of scenery. So that's what I kind of feel like I'm going to need to believe in him.
Yeah. And again, also, it's like, well, yeah, I know. I mean, of course, he's going to be looking for a max extension.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, all these guys are going to be looking for the most money possible. It's just a matter of can they actually get it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, because again, what was it? Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Scotty Barnes, Franz Wagner. Those are all the guys that have been maxed out. So can he be as good as any of those guys next season? You think? Do you think there's a chance?
Yeah, I think there's a chance, but do I think it's overwhelmingly positive? No. I'd say it's probably like 30% chance that he becomes that.
Right. Yeah, last year he put up 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Played 74 games, 53 from the field, right? So again, got to
Yeah, say
improve as
that
the
3-point percent. Yeah, I was gonna say that 3-point percentage. Why don't you?
No, I was just saying, like, yeah, he's got to, improve as a 3-point shooter. Last year, I think he shot 32%, right? He's actually career 34 because I think as a rookie, he shot 34, then 37 the year before, and then 32 this year.
Hmm.
On the same amount of attempts. So that still is going to have to get better. I mean, he's a better player now than he was before. It's just a matter of like for Golden State, it does sound like they're if they don't do anything else, then that's probably they're going to have to probably turn towards extending these guys. So I guess the question is, does he get that extension, or is it more likely that Golden State probably goes into the season with him with like 1 year left or whatever, and then they kind of just renegotiate in the off season, like
Yeah,
next summer?
I think that's a renegotiation kind of deal. I don't foresee him getting a max extension out of nowhere. That's how I feel
Right.
personally. Unless he's balling
Yeah.
out of his mind, cool. But
Well, because once the season starts, then you can't do the extension. I don't think. I
well,
think you have until I think opening night or something like that. I think to get that done, and then if
yeah, then
not,
he's
then
not
he's going to
extended.
enter restricted free agency.
Yeah, then he's not extended.
Yeah, and then I think Moses Moody's in the same boat as well. He wouldn't get a max anyways because he's just not that level of player. Again, he's a good player, but he's not, he's not a max guy. So
Yeah.
we'll see what Golden State does with that. But this, I don't know if nothing burger is the right word, but it's kind of like, what do you expect? Because I'm sure he sees himself, as a really good player, right? Because we know he had the blow up, right? Earlier in the season, right, when he wasn't playing as much as he would have liked, and then he rewarded the Warriors with his play, as they missed the playoffs, but still, like I guess you just kind of wonder what happens, with that situation this season. Because obviously, like it seemed like that they were trying to get guys like Paul George and Markkanen, but then they also were saying these guys are not on the table. Like you can't have Pajemski, you can't have Kaminga, you can't have any of these guys. Just take Moses Moody and picks and call it a day.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I don't know. I'm just not high on the Warriors, not high on their young guys. It's just, it's tragic, really.
Yeah. So again, let us know your thoughts in the comments on all that. But this concludes today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, we appreciate everybody who showed up and showed out in our, all of our live streams, honestly, right? Because all of them did very well, including our last one, which I believe, set a record for, our live streams in terms of the amount of views it had. I want to say it had over 300. And we appreciate all of that. Again, continue to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. If you leave a comment, we'll read it at the beginning of the video. So we appreciate all that. We'll either see you in our next live stream sometime in the future. We haven't figured that out yet, or we'll see you in our next video.